The smell of roasting lamb drifted across the patio. Rosemary mingled with the humid evening air. My sister, Sarah, was hosting dinner. She had gone all out. She lived for these moments. She liked to display her life like a trophy. My son Leo sat beside me. He was 16. He was organizing his peas into a perfect grid. Leo was brilliant. He saw the world through the lens of high-functioning autism. He was the kindest soul I knew. He could rebuild a computer server from scratch. But he struggled to look people in the eye. He did not like it when people spoke too loudly. Sarah's voice cut through the sound of the silverware. She asked Leo about his alternative learning program. Leo did not look up. His fingers paused. He told her it was good. He was focusing on cybersecurity and encryption. Sarah let out a soft, pitying laugh. She called it ambitious. She said it was wonderful that the school gave him little projects. She said it must keep his mind occupied. She said it was good for kids with his specific set of challenges. Her husband, Mark, offered a thin smile. Their 3 children sat at the end of the table. They wore designer labels. They looked bored. They were the gold standard of the family. Varsity captains. Debate stars. Headed for the Ivy League. Sarah never let a meal pass without mentioning their awards. I kept my voice steady. I told her Leo wasn't just doing a project. I said he had been scouted by a national tech firm. He was the youngest person ever invited to their fellowship. Sarah tilted her head. She wore a mask of manufactured sympathy. She said that was sweet. She said she was sure they had diversity quotas to fill. She said it was good for his self-esteem to feel part of the real world. I felt the heat in my chest. I told her it wasn't a quota. He beat 3,000 applicants on a blind test. Sarah waved her hand as if swatting a fly. She said whatever made me feel better was fine. Then she told me to be realistic. She said Leo would always need a safety net. She said he would never hold a high-pressure job. She said he would never live a normal, independent life. She called it the reality of his condition. The table fell silent. It was a heavy, deafening silence. My mother studied her wine glass. My brother looked down at his napkin. Sarah's kids did not look up from their phones. I looked at Leo. His jaw was tight. His head was bowed low. I saw his hand tremble. For 16 years, I watched him fight for every inch of progress. Now his own aunt was treating his future like a failure. Sarah continued. She said we had to have realistic expectations. She said not everyone can be a high achiever. She said some people are meant to be cared for. She said family was there to carry the weight for those who can't. She gave a hollow, tinkling laugh. A few people offered weak smiles. I looked at my sister. I realized she had no idea who was actually carrying the weight. I placed my napkin on the table. I told her she might be right. I told her maybe I hadn't been realistic enough. Sarah nodded. She looked triumphant. She said it was better for Leo if we didn't fill his head with dreams. I stood up. I told them I needed to check on something in the car. I left my phone on the table. I walked out into the cool night air. I didn't go to the car. I walked to the edge of the garden. I looked back through the glass windows. Sarah was gesturing. She was likely talking about her daughter's equestrian trophy. Leo was on the porch swing. He was staring at the dark tree line. I pulled my laptop from my bag in the trunk. I opened a secure portal. I began to type. My heart was pounding. My hand did not shake. I hit send on 3 separate emails. I closed the lid. Monday morning arrived. My phone began to vibrate at 7 a.m. I was in the kitchen making Leo's lunch. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. I ignored the first 4 calls. On the 5th, I picked up. Sarah's voice was high and panicked. She asked me what I had done. I told her good morning. I told her she sounded stressed. She screamed that St. Jude's Preparatory had called. The private endowment for her children's tuition was revoked. The donor had pulled out without notice. She asked if I knew anything about it. I leaned against the counter. I took a sip of tea. I asked why I would know the details of her kids' school funding. She started to sob. She said her husband found out the donor was an LLC. That LLC was registered to my holding company. She realized I had been the one paying for their school. All those years, I was the anonymous family scholarship. I stayed silent for a long moment. I told her I didn't know what to tell her. I suggested the donor decided to be more realistic about their resources. Sarah pleaded with me. She said it was $60,000 a year per child. She said they couldn't afford it on a single salary. They had already paid the deposits. I told her it was a shame. I said public schools have reliable systems. I told her I was sure her kids would thrive there. I said I heard they were very inclusive. Sarah gasped. She asked if this was about the dinner. She asked if it was because she was honest about Leo. I told her I didn't remember much about dinner. I told her I was too busy thinking about my financial future. I told her I realized I had been overextending myself. I told her I stopped the monthly mortgage assistance. I mentioned the $4,000 a month I had been sending. I told her I notified the country club. I was no longer sponsoring their membership. Sarah was hyperventilating. She said I couldn't cut them off. She said they built their entire life around that support. She said they thought the money was from our father's estate. She said I let them believe it was an inheritance. I told her I never said that. I said she assumed it because she couldn't imagine me being successful. She wanted to believe I was a struggling single mom. In reality, I was the one keeping a roof over her head. I told her I was happy to help my sister. I wanted her kids to have the best. But I would not subsidize a lifestyle for someone who belittled my son. I would not pay for the privilege of watching her crush his spirit. She called me vindictive. I told her I was being realistic. I asked if that wasn't what she wanted. The reality was that they were living a lie on my dime. I told her it ended today. I hung up the phone. A few minutes later, my mother called. She was crying. She said Sarah was a mess. She asked if I really pulled the scholarships. I asked my mother if she heard what Sarah said to Leo. I reminded her that Sarah told him he would never be a man. She mocked his hard work in front of everyone. My mother sighed. She said Sarah was just being blunt. I told my mother that now I was being blunt. I had given Sarah over $500,000 in 5 years. While Sarah took that money, she treated Leo like a broken toy. I told her I was done. My mother asked about the children. I told her the children would go to the local high school. They would get a free education like millions of others. I said if they were exceptional, they would be fine. I suggested Sarah and Greg could get second jobs. I said that is what realistic people do. My mother didn't have an answer. She hung up. By the afternoon, my inbox was a war zone. Greg sent a long email about family loyalty. My brother asked if I could wait until the end of the year. I didn't reply to any of them. I went to pick up Leo from his coding club. He climbed into the car. He looked quiet. He asked why Aunt Sarah was texting him. She was telling him she loved him. She was calling him her favorite nephew. I told him she realized his mother doesn't play games. Leo looked at his phone, then at me. He asked if I stopped giving them the money. He said he had seen the ledger on my desk. He knew I was paying for their house. I told him I stopped. He was quiet for a long time. He asked if it was because of him. I told him it was partly that, but I also said it wasn't helping her. It was making her a worse person. She had forgotten how to be grateful. Leo nodded slowly. He said he didn't want them to be poor. I told him they wouldn't be poor. They just wouldn't be pretend rich anymore. They would have to live like everyone else. He leaned his head against the window. He said Sarah's kids weren't actually that happy. He said they talked to him on Discord. They were always stressed about being perfect. He thought a regular school might be better for them, less pressure to be exceptional. I smiled at his perspective. A week later, Sarah showed up at my house. She didn't have her designer handbag. She looked tired. She asked if we could talk. We sat in the kitchen, the same place I had made my decision. She said the kids started at the public school yesterday. She said it was hard. They cried. But then her oldest found out they have a better robotics team. He actually seemed excited. I didn't say anything. I just listened. She said she was sorry. For the first time, she sounded like she meant it. She said she spent years looking down on me because she was terrified. She was terrified of how much she needed me. She hated that I was stronger. She hated that Leo was smarter in ways that mattered. She tried to make him small. She tried to make us feel like we were lacking. It was a projection of her own insecurity. I watched her. I looked for any sign of a performance. But her hands were shaking. There was no tinkling laugh. I accepted her apology, but I told her the money wasn't coming back. Not like before. I told her she and Greg needed to learn to stand on their own feet. I said if they could do that for a year, we could talk. I would consider a smaller fund for the kids' college. But the days of me funding her country club lifestyle were over. Sarah wiped her eyes. She said she understood. She said she didn't deserve it anyway. She asked to see Leo. I told her he was in the den. He was working on a new security protocol. I followed her and watched from the doorway. Sarah knocked softly. She asked Leo if he could show her what he was working on. She apologized for being rude about the fellowship. She said she wanted to hear how he won it. Leo looked up. He scanned her face. He was looking for the hidden sting, the condescending edge. He didn't find it. He pointed to the second monitor. He told her to sit down. He said it was complex. He began to explain encryption based on prime numbers. Sarah sat down. She didn't check her phone. She didn't look at her watch. She just watched my son, the boy she had called a burden. He explained things she would never fully understand. It wasn't a perfect ending. There was still tension in the family. Sarah still had moments where her old self flared up, but the power dynamic had shifted forever. My son wasn't a charity case. I wasn't a silent bank account. We were the foundation of that family. Finally, everyone knew it. Leo went on to his fellowship and flourished. He eventually moved into his own apartment. He lives completely independently, just as I knew he would. As for Sarah, she survived. She and Greg downsized their house. They started living within their means. Her kids became more grounded. They were stripped of the elitism that had been fed to them. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is to stop carrying someone. Sometimes people need to feel the weight of their own lives. They need to feel it before they can appreciate the people holding them up. Sarah learned that the hard way, but she learned it. And Leo? Leo just kept being exceptional. Exactly as he was. Years have passed since that dinner. The memories of the lamb and the rosemary have faded, but the lessons remain. Respect is not something you buy. It is something you earn by showing up. Leo earned it through his brilliance. I earned it by setting a boundary. Sarah earned it by finally being honest. The family still gathers for dinners, but the atmosphere is different now. There is less talk of trophies. There is more talk of actual life. We sit together as equals. No one is carrying anyone else's weight in secret. The weight is shared, as it should be. Leo recently invited us all to his new office. He is a lead consultant now. He sits in a room with glass walls. He still doesn't like loud voices, but when he speaks, everyone listens. Even Sarah. She watched him present a new security framework. She didn't say anything about diversity quotas. She didn't offer a pitying laugh. She just looked at him with something that looked like pride. Real pride. Not the kind you wear like a label. After the presentation, we went to lunch. It was a simple place. No designer labels required. No country club membership needed. We just ate and talked. The conversation was quiet. It was dignified. I looked around the table. I saw a family that had been broken and put back together. It wasn't the same as it was before. It was stronger. The cracks were filled with honesty. I realized then that the emails I sent that night were the best thing I ever did, not because of the money, not because of the power, but because they forced us all to face the truth. The truth is a hard thing to carry, but it is the only thing that doesn't get heavier over time. Leo looked at me and smiled. He didn't need to say anything. He knew. He knew that I had his back. He knew that I always would. But he also knew that he didn't need me to carry him. He was standing on his own. Sarah caught my eye. She gave me a small, genuine nod. It was an acknowledgement. It was a thank you. She was finally standing on her own, too. The house was smaller, the car was older, but she was finally real. We walked out into the sunlight. The air was clear. The future was open. We didn't need to pretend anymore. We were just a family, doing our best, learning how to walk without being carried. Sometimes love looks like a helping hand. Sometimes love looks like letting go. I had to let go of the secret support to save my sister. I had to stand up for my son to save his dignity. And in doing so, I saved myself. The weight of the silence is gone. The weight of the lies is gone. What remains is a quiet strength. A strength that doesn't need to be displayed. A strength that just exists. Like Leo. Like the life he built, I drove home that day feeling light. The humidity was gone. The evening was cool. I thought about that dinner on the patio. I thought about the lamb and the rosemary. I thought about the woman who walked out into the garden. She was scared. She was angry. But she was right. She was realistic. And reality turned out to be a beautiful thing. It turned out to be exactly what we needed. It wasn't a safety net. It was a foundation. A foundation built on respect. A foundation that will last long after the trophies are gone. Leo is working on a new project now. He says it's his most complex one yet. I believe him. He has always been exceptional. But now, he doesn't have to prove it to anyone. He just is. And that is more than enough. That is everything. Sarah called me last night. She wanted to know if I had a good recipe for roast chicken. She was hosting a small dinner. Just us. No labels, no trophies, just a family, sharing a meal, carrying our own weight, together.